Tony. I think. Do we have a quorum?
All righty. The time is 12:15, and I call this meeting of the Northeast Independent School Health Advisory Council to order. The meeting is in compliance with Section 28.004 of the Texas Education Code and applicable board policy. The council's meeting today will address only the topics on the agenda. No other topics will be discussed during the meeting. SHAC meetings are open to the public. Guests wishing to address the SHAC may do so by emailing the SHAC committee at shac@neisd.net. Any person that causes disruption during the meeting will be asked to leave. Thank you for your cooperation. And with that said, the first matter on today's agenda is the approval of the minutes from May 17th, 2023. Is there a motion to approve the May 17 minutes? Thank you, Debbie. Is there a second? Thank you. Is there any discussion? All right. Seeing no discussion or hearing none, all those in favor say aye and raise your hand.
Aye. You're on Zoom. Please raise your hand.
Thank you. See you on Zoom. Any opposed, say nay and raise your hand. All righty. The motion is approved. And with that, Tony.
All right. Thank you very much for everyone being here. Okay, so the second item on the agenda. The second item on the agenda, can you hear me now? There we go. Is the Chase recommendation for the High School Health 1 HSAE and Abuse Prevention Curriculum Materials with the suggested edits and revisions. Before we actually get into that, I do want to just make sure that everyone keeps in mind that the Chase Committee has spent hours and hours, over 14 hours, reviewing and discussing these items of the edits for the curriculum at nauseum to some extent. And so if you'll please keep that in mind when you're thinking about the or listening to the presentation, and jot down any questions or comments you may have, but let's try to stay focused and not worry about getting too deep into the weeds, because we have done that, like I said, over the 14 plus hours, and so that we can come to a discussion at that point. All right, with that, I'd like to introduce Ben Elliott to start the presentation.
All right, Jen, you're gonna drive it.
I am driving.
All right. Can this move? All right. Thank you, everybody, for making time to be here. Those of you that made it on Zoom, we appreciate it. Without y'all, we wouldn't have a quorum to get this done. So we really appreciate y'all spending the time on this Friday. So we're going to try to move through this really quickly. As Tony said, it took us 14 hours to get through it, and we have about 1 hour here to spend together. So we're going to try to really just hone in on specifically the changes that we made, with the idea or hope that some of y'all had a chance to pre-review this through the PDFs that were emailed with the RSVP and the meeting info by Jen. So that being said, is there anyone here that has not reviewed any of these edited lessons at all? That's good. All right, so what is it? Were you on lesson 1 or where are you at?
This is actually lesson A. Do you want me to go to lesson 1? This is the
All right, so we'll just go through, we'll kind of skim through this quickly. So this is the reproductive and sexual health part of the curriculum, basically the biological piece. This isn't really in the books. This is digital materials and slides. So teacher note-taking guide here. I'm going to pull mine up so I can read it closer. Wherever you see the highlights, that's something that we made an adjustment to. Where you can see that right there on the first page, menstruation is highlighted, but it's highlighted because it's duplicated in that column, right? So you see it again a little farther down with a strike through. Real simple edit there. The essential question Why is it important to tell a parent or other trusted adult if signs of pregnancy occur? The reason that is highlighted is because the original content, I believe, said, I don't have it here. Jen, what was the original content of that? It said,
The materials don't have essential questions.
Okay.
We do that as part of our lesson planning, and that's actually what the TEAC was.
got it. Okay, so that is text that was completely added from the TEACs that was not in the printed materials. So I'm kind of just going to skim through this without touching every point. Did anybody have a chance to review this that has a comment or that has a concern that needs to be discussed as it pertains to this lesson? Or is there anybody here that does want me to go through these lessons line by line, because that'll suck us in? But so more or less, this lesson is just, you see the slides that are basically the anatomy diagrams: female reproductive system, male reproductive system. We have an edit on page, what went on here? Page 11. Anyway, there's a few edits where, for example, it says play video. Well, it's an animation, not a video, so we changed that word. Subtle little edit like that. Let's see. Reproductive systems.
I think the biggest move, Ben, was we took the whole chunk on menstruation and moved it up earlier. And then, yeah, so it flowed better. And then there was a couple activities that Katie added, because this was a lot of teacher talking and not much students doing anything. And so Katie used a few activities that we had used previously.
Perfect.
It's in her email.
So Katie brought up a good point to remind you all, if y'all have your smartphones here and you can access the email that Jen sent out for this meeting, these are actually linked in that email, so that if you do want to follow along on your own device or scan through it to look for anything that isn't up on the screen, you can do so as we're following along here. So as what Jen was saying is the menstruation portion of this lesson was farther down in the lesson, but we moved it up to follow right after the female reproductive anatomy, so that the lesson just flowed and made more sense. This was not really a lesson that had any points of contention for us as a committee. Really, we just kind of fine-tuned the way, the organization of it, and changed a little bit of the grammatical text. Other than that, where there weren't any really moral or issues that didn't go with TEACs or anything to that degree. It was fairly basic, pretty scientific, accurate information. So there wasn't a lot of changes we made here. I'd like to kind of just breeze through this. So if anyone has any questions, or let me just ask the question, does anybody want to have any discussion on the reproductive and sexual health, or are we all good to kind of move on? Are we good?
I don't see anybody, so go ahead.
All right.
Keep moving.
I'm going to go ahead and take us through to the note-taking guide of that lesson real quick. Jen, if you could get on there just so they can see what the students are going to see. It's 4 pages. So you kind of see here, just like you're going to see on every note-taking guide for every lesson, our key message: abstinence from all forms of sexual activity when used consistently and correctly is the only 100% effective method in preventing STDs, including HIV and AIDS, pregnancy, and the emotional trauma associated with sexual activity. So we're going to see that at the beginning of every student note-taking guide for all of these lessons, and then followed by the essential question of each lesson. In this case, why is it important to tell a parent or trusted adult if signs of pregnancy occur?
Hey, Ben.
Yes, ma'am?
Hey, Ben, sorry.
Who's?
Oh,
That's Diana.
it looks like we may have forgotten the word adolescent sexual activity up there in the key message.
Good catch. Yes, we will add that, and we'll make sure that's in the notes.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, you're good catch, Diana. Thank you. And some of the subsequent lessons will probably already have that changed. So the emotional trauma associated with adolescent sexual activity is how that should read on the key message. Here you'll see.
Is somebody making a note so we can catch that?
Made.
Actually going to be in the minutes.
You have the female anatomy organ chart there that the students will be asked to fill in, identifying item there. The menstrual cycle, you see the question, how can the menstrual cycle be an indicator of early pregnancy? What are the physical characteristics women may encounter during a menstrual cycle? Page 2, we have the male anatomy, fill in the blank style. The activity, the process of fertilization. Next page, page 3, they'll see the fetal development stages with some fill in the blanks below that on listing some signs and symptoms of pregnancy, resources for help. The lesson talks a little bit about postpartum depression, the fill in the blank words there that would be used from the teacher guide. Postpartum depression is different from the baby blues. So it talks about the baby blues, postpartum depression. Then go down, you'll see some puberty changes. They'll be asked to identify the female versus male changes that occur during puberty with hormone changes. And then again, you see the key message at the bottom reiterated along with the answer summary to the key question. And then the parent activities. So a parent interview is part of every lesson as well, which is one thing that we actually really like about this curriculum, that it does have a lot of parent interaction. So here they're asked to interview a parent or guardian by asking the following questions. What was puberty like for you as a teen? Where did you find emotional support if or when you needed it? So that is the student note-taking guide for reproductive and sexual health. Is there any discussion? Anybody would like to bring anything up this time? We're good? Jen, if you could drive us to lesson 1. We'll go ahead and jump into lesson 1, starting with the teacher's leader guide. Again, if you're following along, you will see the... Are you on it yet? Oh, okay. So the highlights are where we made edits. Essential question that was added. What is the only way to avoid detours from sexual activity that could make it more difficult to reach your goals? This lesson is about setting goals and how sexual activity could potentially derail one from those goals. So that is the essential question that was added here. You'll see optional activities is lined through. You'll see that on every lesson because the publisher materials have optional activities. We are removing those and just sticking with the scripted activities that are given here. Let's see. If there's anything that y'all that you see highlighted that you want to ask a particular question about, please go ahead and just raise your hand or chime in. You'll see 3x5 cards is lined out and replaced with sticky notes. That's just a consumables thing for cost and ease of the classroom. The posters are crossed out as well because the curriculum does include posters that we're not including with the teaching. So lesson 1 script. So right there you see student note-taking guide. This is gonna be a trend in all the lessons. That is highlighted because it says in the student, what is this? The student books, workbooks, which we're not getting those. So they'll just be receiving the NEISD note-taking guides. What you're going to see on the right hand, so the way these are broken out, everything on the left is the script and everything on the right are the slides, which actually will be presented along with the teaching of these lessons. So on the right hand side where you see comments below the slide, those are things that we either needed to add to or revise in the slide. So here you'll see a note that adding the NEISD key message, again, abstinence from all forms of sexual activity. That key message is going to be reiterated on that slide. Scrolling down. Again, simple edits, lining out page numbers because the students won't have workbooks. Replacing note-taking guide where it said student workbook before. So this... can you go up one slide? Because I want to point out so that paragraph that you see highlighted there, this is something recommended by one of our committee members to add. because in a lot of these video lessons, they talk, there's interviewers or actors that are talking about the impacts that sex had in their life. So we're adding this sort of disclaimer message that says not all teenagers are having sex. In fact, teens having sex are the minority. But this video is featuring teens who are discussing having had sex, whether once or more, so you can better understand some of the complications and potential repercussions for teens. So that's something that you're going to see repeat throughout these lessons. Just wanted y'all to be aware of that. Here where you see the green items were items that were added to meet a TEAC where it may have otherwise been absent previously. On the right-hand side, again, you're going to see clips from the video that go along with this lesson, and those edits are actually the suggested edits to the video, which you can find if you click that link that says transcript. It'll take you to the actual transcript, the dialogue of the video, and it'll give a little bit more detail of what those cuts were. This one in particular, there was one girl who was talking about her goals, and one of her goals was to open a women's center for girls who had problems with cutting, suicide and drugs, and we decided as a committee that it wasn't really pertinent to the lesson, so we decided to cut out mention of cutting, suicide, and drugs because it wasn't necessary or really relevant to this lesson. Again, another suggested cut. One of the actors talked about, quote, going around sleeping with everything. We thought the way that was worded was sort of objectifying and decided to, we discussed clipping that. The alternative was suggested that this clip provides a male perspective about sex, takes some ownership off of females in sexual situations, while the statement of, quote, everything is cringeworthy, and as a female hurtful to hear, it would benefit to hear from a male that it is his responsibility to also change his perspective. So based on that, we did decide to recommend to keep it with the agreement that the lessons call out objectification of women as being a negative note. So that's teacher note here. I'm sorry, what? So objectifying women is a bad character trait. So the teacher note was added, Ryan's statement. I also realized I wasn't put on earth to just go around sleeping with everything is a clear example of unhealthy character traits and dating romantic relationships. If a student brings concern to the statement, lead the discussion using TEACS 18B from the 6th grade, TEACS 20E. So it kind of guides them on how to answer the question they were using the TEACS. Scrolling down, some just kind of, okay, so there where you see a line through, this is the publisher's lesson on the left, talking about opening the home for girls. We line that out because it's taken out of the video, take out turning to the page. We get down to the activity. Let's see here, what do we change here? I'm not.
Not a lot more.
Yeah, there's really not a lot more edits there. I'm trying to see if there's anything significant that I want to make mention of. Just kind of goes through more video lessons talking with people that were talking about their goals, how their goals were impacted by choosing to become sexually active. So here's an item that's going to come up a couple of times on slide, let's see here, slide 14, Jen. So you'll see the words at risk right there stricken through. So they talk a lot about at-risk sexual behavior, which later is defined, right? They talk about there's at-risk behaviors in general, which include drinking, doing drugs, having sex. You know, the at-risk sexual behavior is identified as certain sexual activity, but we decided to just leave out at risk in this context and just say not to engage in sexual behavior, leaving out that at risk piece, which we think kind of adds some ambiguity to what they're saying there for the kids. So We left that as just saying sexual behavior, not saying at-risk sexual behavior. You'll see that a few times. Just trying to see if there's anything else noteworthy here. So I think those are the major cuts from lesson 1. I don't know if anybody has any comments, questions, concerns. If not, we'll take a look at the student note-taking guide for lesson 1. Again, you see our 2 lessons here. Personal goal setting ideas. How do you avoid detours? Our key message again at the top and bottom, summary of our essential question, and then the parent interview. Anyone? Discussion? Sorry, and I'm kind of paraphrasing and moving through this, right? We have to hope that you guys reviewed this already, and if you do see anything that sticks out, please stop us, but we're trying to get her done so we can get everybody home for the weekend and get a vote. All right, lesson 2. Again, you see your teacher's kind of outline here. One thing I want to note, because it's not highlighted, but it's something that we discussed briefly. So where you see the key teaching points, those are, from the publisher, the 1 through 3s, and then there's the teacher note there that says these key teaching points apply to all teens, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity. So that's not a script item. That's just an item for the teacher to recognize, right? And we have it there. We decided to actually write it there in case a question in class comes up. So that the idea is that these materials are the answer to any question that the students ask. If they cannot find the answer in these materials or in the TEKS, the idea is that they defer to the district key statement that anything outside the boundaries of this curriculum, they be referred to a parent or trusted adult. So just wanted to note that. Again, optional activities are lined out, posters are lined out. Key message added to this slide, 16. I want to make sure that that abstinence message is heavily reinforced throughout. Let's see here. On slide 18, we had a video edit here on the right-hand side. So if y'all want to take a look at that transcript, if you have a chance. Do y'all want us to pull up the transcript, or are you good? All right, we're good. So there was a recommended cut. There was a quote in this video that said, "Watch out for the drugs you're taking." One member suggested that assumes that all kids are taking drugs. Our suggestion was to keep that, but to move it. So this speaker has another speaking part. So the suggestion is to cut that part and move it to right after. There's a second segment where he talks about, it kind of comes full circle. Actually, I do want to pull up the transcript, yeah.
This is probably one of the only ones.
Because
It's kind of confusing. So it's taking this part and moving it here.
I can't read that far. I have to get it up on my screen.
While you're
Huh? I'll read it for the mic. So that, okay, so to follow the first segment to fully complete the idea. Okay, so it kind of completes the idea of, I have to at least try it once. Then it kind of goes into, in hindsight, it wasn't really a great idea. So taken at face value, his initial statement kind of makes it sound like, oh, it's okay to try it once, but then it kind of loops back to it can cause bad habits and you can just spiral out of control. So it kind of opens and closes it by moving that segment to complete a good, healthy thought there. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Yes, I'm sorry.
So I read that really carefully because you guys had highlighted it. And I still, like, when I read it, I still feel like the guy's like, it's okay to try something once. It's just as long as you watch what you're doing.
So, did you read it from the transcript from this whole paragraph?
Yeah.
Okay.
I put the two together and like, okay, if I read them together, what do I take from it? And I still take away, you just got to watch what you're doing. You can still do it, but just watch and make sure that you don't start to spiral. I still get the implication that it might be okay to try that drug one time.
It's part of TEACS to kind of establish the relationship between taking substances and how it can cause negative effects. So I think that was the reason why in our discussion it wasn't a unanimous decision to keep it, but I think that's where we kind of got to the idea of instead of eliminating it, it made more sense to go with to kind of dispel it as a myth, right? Because to your point, trying everything once, and if you don't like it, don't do it again. And in hindsight, that wasn't really great because I ended up using that motto for a long time. And it can be really dangerous if you don't watch what you're doing regularly. You can pick up bad habits and spiral out of control, and you got to watch the people that are around you because that influences your decision making. You have to watch the things that you're taking. The drugs that you're taking can affect your decision making. And it's kind of like I said, led me to a downward spiral. So it was kind of, I get what you're saying, and
I think like you could leave it in if you dropped, you got to watch the things that you're taking, the drugs that you're taking, and it can affect your decision making. And because it still says you got to watch the things that you're taking. If you just take that off, then the last thought is not, you
right.
can still do it, you just got to watch what you're doing. But the last thought would be, it led me to a bad decision, and I still had to watch what my peers were doing around me as well. But that very last sentence still kind of implies, to me. I think it's fine, except for that one little
So the one tricky part about it is because it is a video, right? And it would be really easy to just trim that out of a transcript. But in a video, if you have a kid speaking and kind of in a conversation and then you just chop out a few words that he said and you're going to get that kind of
but
quick
it's the
cut.
very last sentence or two that he says. If you just stopped him at, and you got to watch the people that are around you because that influences your decision making, cut it off. That's my thought.
Yeah, I mean, and I will.
I mean, I watched the video. I'd have to rewatch it to see like how awkward he is if you cut it there. But that's my hang up on that particular thing. That's all I'm bringing up. Just.
So are we also suggesting that we cut out so is that a hard stop you're suggesting?
That kind of actually goes back to the 359 through 342, I believe, that was initially suggested to be a cut, but then it was further discussed to leave it, but to move it. So I think she's kind of on the discussion is more surrounding the initial cut.
Well, I don't mind moving the paragraph to come full circle with what he's saying, and I like what he says. Someone told me to try everything once, and if you don't like it, don't do it again. And in hindsight, that wasn't really great. Blah blah blah. And then he goes on and says, and you got to watch the people that are around you because that influences your decision making. Full stop. Right there. The last sentence says you got to watch the things that you're taking, the drugs that you're taking, as if you're still taking everybody's taking drugs. It still implies that people are taking drugs, and it leaves the thought. But the last thought could be, watch your peers. Who you hang out with also directly influences you, and so you don't want to be the one making the poor decision. I think leaving it there, I'm really comfortable with. What I don't find comfort with is that last thought kind of implying that just as long as you're watching the drugs that you're taking, you'll be fine.
But I do like the last part of that sentence. It says, this poor decision-making almost led him in almost complete ruin. And I think that that's pretty powerful, that a kid would recognize that it was almost complete ruin.
Yes, but he says that before. That's like, he says it twice. So in the first part, he says, and if you don't watch what you're doing regularly, you can pick up habits and it can just spiral out of control.
And this, again, this was not a unanimous decision by any means, and And, huh? This one was? So, Emma, do you want to jump on and kind of confirm so can you scroll up? So, if you read that speaker 6 right there, that's on the screen right now, that's the first paragraph that speaker says. And then the second paragraph that's highlighted would be inserted right after that to complete that thought. Emma?
Did you want me to read them or?
No, I was
Oh,
just
okay.
going to ask you, I was just telling the group
Okay,
to
got it.
read. I'm sorry.
I think some of the discussion we had is that as much as we would like to believe that kids aren't already knowledgeable or thinking about some of these topics, the likelihood is we're not introducing these ideas to students. What we're doing is hoping to answer questions that they're already having or respond to thoughts that they may already be having. And I think that last sentence that the speaker says, that it led me into a downward spiral, the addition to that from what he hasn't said earlier is that left me in a place of almost complete ruin. So it really highlights the impact that some of these decisions, these ideas that he's saying in hindsight that wasn't a great idea, have had on his life. And I think that is really impactful to kids. The other thing that we talked about is that this comment where he says, try everything once, this video segment is really talking to the fact that there is a danger in activities even the first time. So dispelling the myth that the first time you do something, there's some sort of safeguard in place that kids sometimes have.
And part of the lessons too, and I don't want to derail the whole conversation on this, and I appreciate we have to have the discussion, but I know that part of it is around the decision making and the aspects that drugs and alcohol being part of that consequence is in the TEKS. So that's sort of where we kind of were at with that. Like I said, it was something we discussed these at great length, and I don't want to just breeze over.
I think it's a good comment, and we appreciate that. Like I said, I do think that we did spend quite a bit of time in the committee, standing committee, reviewing this, and to credit the person next to you, Ron said that it really did. It opened the book and then closed the book because of what he said after that. And so the thought, or is that the correct term that you would say, Ron? Or the thought?
Yeah, absolutely. The reason this ended up as unanimous is because of the change and moving it. Had it not been moved, it would not have been a unanimous keep. And so by opening the thought and closing the thought, it keeps it all bunched together. I don't want to go too far into the weeds, but I also kind of am curious to look at what the video is again, because we don't have them memorized. Would it be possible to cut that? Does the rest of the board, or the committee, consider taking a look at that? Or like the idea overall is the overarching, and that one sentence I don't think will completely derail it, though I completely understand Jessica's point there, because it does, the way you read that, you got to watch the things you're taking. That implies you're taking it. The drugs you're taking it can affect. It says you are doing it. If it's not a smooth, and maybe this is what happened the day of, if it's not a smooth way to cut it out, we may have just relied on the fact that it's an open the idea, close the idea with that very last sentence.
Yeah, that was suggestion. Is we wanted just to clip that short piece because we wanted to keep the end message, which and it kind of, like I said, led me to a downward spiral that left me in a place of almost ruin.
Right.
And so that was the impact of the negative influence and the negative thoughts or myth that I should try something once.
And it kind of, it just kind of, to Tony's point, it kind of closes the door with like the realization that was poor advice. That was advice that he got, and he realized why that was such bad advice. At this point, I mean,
Well, I do just want to help too with that one piece. The students have already in the health classes gone through the substance abuse and misuse unit. And so one of the things they did learn about is also when you hear the word drug, that also includes medications. And so one of the things that can be implied with his statement, you've got to watch the things that you're taking, are also simple over-the-counter drugs that can be considered abusive if they're taken incorrectly. And so students have gone through this to where hearing, like, if I've been prescribed a painkiller and I misuse that or I abuse that painkiller, that is also could fall into that statement of you've got to watch the things that you're taking, because again, that is a very easy way to spiral on something that is over the counter or that is a prescription that is legal, but can be misused and abused as well. And so knowing how opioids and things like those happen very quickly, students can start to put those pieces together with the TEAC that reads, students are expected to examine factors including alcohol and other substances that increase sexual risk and that affect setting, perceiving, respecting, and making decisions about boundaries.
We have 6 more lessons to go, everybody. We're going to make it.
Sorry. I like what you said. Is there a way then to put in the teacher says and reintroduces that idea again about the drugs that you may be taking because maybe you injured your knee or whatever? I think then if you have that reminder, it's absolutely fine the way it is.
It's a friendly.
So
That would be a friendly amendment to
It's there on
addition.
If you
Yeah.
look at slide 19, scroll down, Jen. So slide 19 is what follows up that video, and this is the teacher's script that asks and guides some conversation. Asks what advice did the teens or young adults give regarding decision making. Second question, how can peers and friends influence your decision making? Third question, what factors contribute to bad decisions? Parentheses, being under the influence of alcohol, drugs, trying to please or impress others. So it is kind of a guided discussion right there as after the video, with drugs and alcohol being a specific part of that conversation as to what factors can contribute to bad decision making. So that's the kind of idea of it just being an example of where bad advice was given, bad decisions were made, and in retrospect, it was realized that it was a harmful choice.
So, Katie, we could add, even if it's a prescription drug,
Like as an example.
Yeah.
as an exemption. Okay,
I'm making that note right now.
great. Thank you.
Great.
All right,
Good. Thank you, Jessica. All right.
keep moving.
That being said, anybody else? We're going to kind of breeze through because we.
Says the timekeeper.
At the top of lesson 2, where it's listing the teacher materials, it says one die or a pair of die. I think it's one die or a pair of dice, right?
Yes.
That's it.
Good catch. All right. I'm skimming through everything else's grammatical activities. Trying to see if there's anything substance. Can you pull up since everyone's kind of following along, I'm gonna have Jen pull up the note-taking guide real quick so we can get a glance at it. The note-taking guide, this is the material the students are going to see again. Again, we have our key message, essential question in this lesson. Why is it important to use a thoughtful process when making decisions, being our essential question. Here's all the lessons from the publisher book. The Stop, Think, and Go activity. Again, I'm going to assume most of us have already reviewed this. So does anybody have any conversation pieces or any suggestions on the note-taking guide? Anything that stands out to you that needs to be addressed here?
I don't see any. Keep moving.
All right. Tony's just trying to make sure we get to a vote today, otherwise we're in trouble. All right, lesson 3. Lesson 3 is pregnancy. This was one of the more contentious lessons, I would say, within the committee. Let's see here at our central question again. What is the only 100% effective way to eliminate risk and avoid the consequences of pregnancy being our essential question here, leading back to abstinence. We're removing optional activities, removing posters, add our key message to the first slide, our abstinence-centric message, which is repeated. So here, we're going to focus on slide 33. I'm going to just give this for a minute and talk about one of the key video edits. A lot of community feedback that we received on this lesson was how this video, a lot of the speakers in the video brought like a real negative kind of doomy and gloomy outlook to young pregnancy, which while it is very consequential, some of the speakers just painted it in way too negative of a light. Right here where you see this suggested cut, one of the speakers says you lose practically everything and gain almost nothing. And the child is sort of left as an afterthought, right after saying you gain nothing. So we decided to clip that speaker, and then there's a hard stop at that 436 point, which again is similarly just a negative message that we felt was unnecessary. I'll go ahead and read it. The last speaker, their full speaking part says, "I really wish kids would pay attention to what they say in health class because it's so true. First time having sex could really change the rest of your life." What they went on to say was, "and it's really not worth it. I mean, it just isn't." So that was the hard stop, basically cutting off "and it's really not worth it. I mean, it just isn't." Again, because a baby, even though may not be expected, is still a little blessing. So scrolling on, slide 34 and 35 had no edits. Slide 36, the only edit was to cross out the part speaking of the poster that we're not using. Crossing out reference to the student guide. Here's a lesson about financial impact of having a baby. Slide 39 is good. Slide 40 is another lesson. This is a reducing the risk lesson. This is a volunteer required lesson. This was something that we sort of trimmed a little bit. Volunteers are holding signs, holding one of various contraceptive methods. Class is going to arrange them in order of most to least effective at preventing pregnancy, which kind of goes into slide 41, which has typical use failure rates for the various contraceptive methods. Here we have that note under the slide that you'll see. We felt it was important to add the definition of failure rate to say the following list of contraceptive methods show the percentages of unplanned pregnancy during the first year of use using this method based on typical use. So that is sort of the answer to the first activity. Slide, what is this? I guess 41 still. Is it the next page of slide 41, Jen? So there's a quick note that we decided to cross out. In the teacher script, it says some of you may have heard about the withdrawal or pull-out method for preventing pregnancy. We decided to remove the text that says or pull-out, but leave the rest of it talking about the withdrawal method because it is commonly discussed and is a myth that it's effective. So we're leaving it, changing the word pull-out, removing pull-out and making it just say withdrawal. That is the gist of it. Note-taking guide. If anyone has comments on the teacher guide, speak now or forever hold your peace. Note-taking guide. I'm just going to kind of skim through it with y'all. Again, key message, abstinence-centric message there. You'll see, to Diana's point, we did catch emotional trauma associated with adolescent sexual activity on this one. The essential question is there. Have our various activities that are guided by the teacher guide. The budget for the baby, the students are asked to fill in the budget. Then they're going to fill in the contraceptive methods that correspond to the failure rates. Lesson on building character. Then again, our key message, the summary of the essential question, and a parent interview. Again, parent interviews are part of every single one of these lessons. Any comments, questions, concerns? Look at lesson 4, STDs. Here we did add a little bit of text. Safer sex is a myth. It may reduce but does not eliminate the risk of pregnancy. Again, essential question, what is the only 100% effective method to prevent contracting STDs? So there's emphasis on the myth of safe and safer sex being effective. Again, next page. So slide 43, you'll see where we crossed out the words at risk. That's kind of a repetitive theme. We just left it to say sexual behavior. On the right-hand side, you'll see that we want to add our key message to that first slide of the lesson. Again, every lesson will be similar. Revise point number 3 of that slide to say safe or safer sex is a myth, may reduce but does not eliminate the risk of pregnancy or contracting an STD. Slide 44, clear. 45, so we had some video edits. So again, here on slide 45, you're going to see our note that's pretty repetitive. Wherever there's a video of young people talking about having sex, we have the not all teenagers are having sex note. Here, this is something that came up in the board meeting if y'all were listening. So one young lady kind of chuckled when she talked about having sex. I have to get the text open, but our suggestion here was, let's see. She said, I didn't know that I had an STD. In fact, the particular STD I had called HPV. And then she giggles. It's really common and most people don't know they have it. It was suggested to kind of remove the laughter part of that just because of normalization. We're going to ask that the sound just be muted on that part because you can't really cut it out without making the video look choppy. The other video cut, 245 through 258. Let me get that transcript up. So that portion of the video is a speaker that says, I had sex with a girl that I didn't know well at the time. We both hung out with some friends that we both knew, and it just happened. Which we felt was kind of a little too casual and didn't necessarily reinforce any point that wasn't already there. So we're going to ask for that segment to be cut. Another section, 323 through 332. Somebody talks about having, quote, dozens of sexual partners. That actual segment says, I didn't even think I was too promiscuous because I had friends that had dozens of sexual partners, too many to count. So we asked for that segment to be clipped because it's just goes a little too far with normalizing youth sex. Slide 46 goes into avoiding the risk. 47, there was an addition to the script to meet a TEAC. STDs have various modes of transmission. Looking through the information on the slide, add the various modes of transmission to your note-taking guide. And then you'll see the filled-in slide there. And then we go into an activity, distributing the 3x5 cards. Does this one, do we decide to keep the 3x5 cards here? Yeah, all right. Again, at the end of that activity, there's reinforcement in the script. What is the only 100% effective method to prevent contracting an STD? And the answer to be given by students is abstinence. Slide 49, teacher script was added to hit this TEAC. Anywhere in green that you see on here is addition that was not previous there to meet a TEAC. Talks about we've discussed transmission of STDs, how quickly they're spread, in your note-taking guide, and explain the importance for sexually active individuals to get tested at a yearly checkup. etc. I'll let y'all read that. So that's what we added to meet TEAC 21E. Again, slide 50, there was some text added to meet TEAC 21D. So this is, the material was there, or the information was there, we just had to add a way for the students to demonstrate their knowledge. Then we'll go into the slides showing actual images of STDs in some cases. It goes through individual STDs, talks about signs and symptoms. Where you see these pink squares, that's where a slide for syphilis and trichomoniasis have to be added because the publisher didn't provide any. Yes, Jessica. It's talked about in the curriculum, I believe. There's just not a slide.
It's on slide 52.
Oh, there it is, thank you. Because it's not in that little speaker 6 section or anything like that. I didn't see it, sorry.
No worries. There just wasn't a slide that actually presented the. I'm sorry. So gonorrhea is there. Syphilis and trichomoniasis are the ones that we had to add. I apologize if I blanked that or said it wrong. So the reason that we're suggesting to add the slide is because they're actually listed. They're actually named in the curriculum. There just wasn't individual slides for them. And they're named in the TEACs.
In the TEACs, right.
Thank you, Katie and Rachel. Let's go ahead and scroll down. We have HPV. We have male HPV. That's where one of the lessons we discussed removing the cauliflower activity. Slide 55, we had to add some information to the script, asking the students true or false. All STDs show symptoms. Circle your answer in your note-taking guide. Give students a moment. The answer is false. Not all STDs will show symptoms. This is another reason why testing is important. Scrolling down. Did I just scroll down or up? Herpes blisters. Facts versus myth about AIDS. Slide 58. Some script was added in your note-taking guide. Describe the signs and symptoms of HIV/AIDS as just discussed under myth number 2. On slide 61, Jen, you'll see on the right-hand side there's a suggestion, change the title of the slide to say, is safe or safer sex completely safe? Rather than what it currently says, what about safe or safer sex? So we're trying to reinforce that it is not. I think. Okay, so, and then on slide 63, there was a note, there was some discussion talking about mutual masturbation. We decided that terminology be stricken through and changed to touching in the genital area, and that basically is a segment talking about what the at-risk. So here we actually left at-risk sexual behaviors because it defines what they are. What are at-risk sexual behaviors? Vaginal sex, anal sex, oral sex, and it did say mutual masturbation. We are changing that to say touching in the genital area. And then the lesson summary, we have the recap of the essential question. What is the only 100% safe and effective way? Again, reinforcing abstinence. So any discussion there? No?
Looks like we can keep moving.
Note-taking guide, Jen? So staying with the theme, key message, essential question, activities that are guided by the leader guide and the slides. Here's where they're asked to talk if the STDs are curable or not, signs and symptoms, how well do condoms reduce the risk, with that red question at the bottom. Blank provides the only 100% effective protection against pregnancy or contracting STDs. The answer is abstinence. On the last page, Jen, key message again reinforced. Summary of the essential question reinforced, both pointing to abstinence. And then our parent interview, 3 questions to go home and talk to your parents about It's going to drive some good conversations at home. Anyone?
I don't see any hands up,
All right,
so
lesson
keep going.
Five, the best relationship. Developing healthy relationships. Got our teaching points. Our essential question here, how do friendships provide a foundation for healthy dating / romantic relationships? Key message added to the lead slide. So here we have a video edit, slide 67. This is where we get into the video for this lesson. The suggested edit here. Getting to it. The portion suggested to be cut, 215 to 242, says, well, I was 17 years old and had sex before, but I had never had... I'm sorry, it's stricken through. Okay. I was 17 years old and he had sex before, but I had never had sex, and I wasn't planning on having sex. But he really wanted to, and I finally just said, okay, yeah, I can have sex with this guy. He's really hot and he wants me. And that made me feel really great, and I thought, what do I have to lose? Now it's like, what are you talking about? You have everything to lose. So the suggestion and the reasoning for cutting that was it just goes a little too far, normalizing the sexualization of minors, because it is in this script, it says when I was 17 years old. So it's talking about a minor engaging in sexual activity, so we opted to clip it. Oh, Jessica. Don't apologize. Yeah, that's what we're here for.
Did you guys have any discussion about the very next thing after that cut? When
On the
I was
transcript?
15, I met this guy, we fell in love, and we had sex, but eventually it seemed like we became different people and we didn't get along as well, so we broke up. Did you think about maybe then bringing up her other part to, I'd be with a guy and we'd have sex, and I thought that meant that he loved me, that he wanted to be with me, that I was special to him, and then he'd realize and learn that to him, it didn't mean that at all. If you put those two together, I'm fine with it, because it opens that book and closes that book. Like, love does not necessarily equal sex, but you can think that that's what that meant, but it's not really, and so she comes to that understanding, like, this is not going to work for me. But the first sentence she says, well, I fell in love, so we have sex. Like, that's not like the progression necessarily of every relationship that you have. Did you have any discussion on that?
No, actually, it doesn't appear that we did. I'm looking at our notes. Hang on.
I don't believe we really had much discussion because there's only one speaker in between, and so it's a kind of a quick. There's a intermission in between, but it opens the book and closes the book.
Pretty quickly.
And Jessica, if you look in the leader guide on slide 69, it does go back to her part of the video and talks about that being an emotional trap. So it does add some reinforcement in the actual lessons and the teaching that her quote there, which is actually written again, is defined as the emotional trap. So it kind of reinforces that. Slide 70. So slide 70 was the result of another video cut. I think it's just cut from here. I don't see.
Yeah, we already took it off the slide.
I don't even remember what her quote was now, but I know that was my.
It was the I'd have sex, and because
Oh, that is her.
he thought
okay,
I was hot,
okay.
or he was
all right.
hot.
That's the speaker 9 cut. I apologize. That is the cut that I just read to y'all. So her quote was again written, that I can have sex with this guy, he's really hot, was written there on that slide that said infatuation trap, so we cut that. It still talks about what infatuation is and how it's confused with love, but we removed the quote. Slide 71, that lesson asks for a guy volunteer to read the paragraph. We lined through, asked for a guy. It says ask for a volunteer to read the bulleted points. Lined through paragraph because we don't necessarily want the quote read by a student in front of the class, just because it does talk about sex, having sex, so we asked them to just read the bulleted points. Then it goes into an activity, shows a video of an orchestra tuning, kind of leads the discussion kind of metaphorically about the orchestra tuning being viable to relationship and sex being the bass drum, and you can't tune an orchestra to a bass drum. Let's see here. Next, then there's another lesson that talks about, that kind of relates relationships to a fire in a fireplace, how you build a fire in the fireplace, it's safe and provides warmth, and if you build it in the middle of the floor, the cabin will burn down. So the fire in the middle of the floor being the negative association with sex. It lacks a safe space of commitment, and the cabin would burn down. Is there anything here that anybody sees?
Don't think so. Keep moving.
One note, slide 77, just in case anyone reads it later. So we did line through, there's part of the script that says lead a brief class discussion. There's a few spots in the later lessons that talk about lead a discussion. We don't like that terminology because we want everything to stick to the script. So a lot of times where it says lead a discussion will be replaced with ask and then script. We get to our lesson summary. All right, if nobody has anything, Jen, can we look at the note-taking guide? Key message, essential question. Here's where we'll have our emotional trap, infatuation trap, and sex trap. The infatuation trap quote removed. The fireplace lesson. Building self-esteem. What is really important to you? Key message reinforcement, summary of the essential question, parent interview. Anybody see anything y'all don't like in here?
Everybody looks good.
All
Keep
right,
moving.
Let's go to 6. Do we have everybody we started with?
The last one.
She's not gone though.
Okay.
All right, lesson 6, choosing the best journey. Again, adding our keynote to the slide. Suggested edit to this slide, edit to read abstinence/delaying sexual activity, ideally until marriage, is the healthiest choice to provide freedom from sexual risks. In the slide, you'll see it just says delaying sexual activity, so we're opting to add the word abstinence in front of that. Couple slide revisions on 80. Why are the teens choosing to delay sex? Revised to read, why are the teens in the video choosing to be abstinent/delay sex? Again, just reinforcing abstinence everywhere. Same thing with slide 82. Everywhere delaying sex stands by itself, we add abstinence/delay sex. Slide 83, it asks for a girl volunteer. We line through that, say, listen as I read. With this one, we actually prefer for the teacher to read aloud instead of a student reading. just because of the content. Again, on slide 83, or I guess it's just further down, same thing. Everywhere where it was asking for a volunteer to read, the teacher's going to read instead. Adding abstinence in front of delay sex. Again, slide 84, same thing. We're just adding abstinence. Here's where you'll see the curriculum talk about at-risk behaviors. You'll scroll down a little bit and we'll see those at-risk sexual behaviors again identified, with mutual masturbation being replaced with touching of the genital area again. Several points. A lot of these highlights are just where we added abstinence in front of delaying sex. We're not replacing it, we're just adding it in front. Slide 85, we added the ideally until marriage, because that is how the Texas Education Code reads. Okay, so here, this was a brief conversation, slide 86. So part of the script, the last sentence of the script says the words, all of these principles apply regardless of a person's sexual orientation or gender identity. We opted to cross that off of the script and leave it unspoken because it's already on every lesson as the key teaching points, and if the question is asked, it's there for teachers to guide on how to answer it. We didn't want it proactively in the script. Any hands up? We're good so far? We go to talking about character traits in slide 87. Slide 88, they're guided to their note-taking guide to fill out some things. Slide 88, there at the bottom, you'll see green where we added to meet a teak. Slide 89, there's a little lesson on infatuation versus love. It's kind of guided. That should be in the note-taking guide as well. We're going to have some fill-in-the-blanks. Then slide 90 gets into an activity. The love test. I think I heard a groan on that one, or maybe I'm imagining that. So that was a topic of conversation that we actually did address.
Pull up the note-taking guide, because that's where you'll see it.
Yeah. So essentially, let's see. Let me get to it.
Ben, do you want me to? I can help with that if you want.
Yeah.
Okay, so for this, the love test, the students were asked to think of a relationship that they were in or one that they had like physically witnessed in real life. So we changed it to give it more of like a vague sense to think about a relationship you've seen in a book, movie, or TV show. And then we edited in the student note-taking guide. It's still the same infatuation and love comparison. We took out the words love test so that it didn't seem like it was like from a magazine kind of thing. But we're asking them to evaluate somebody or a different relationship that they're witnessing. And we changed all of the edits to, instead of saying we or I, or like in my personal relationship, all of them say one person, they, the other people, the
Right.
families. So it kind of makes it.
Made it fictitious.
Yes, thank you.
All right. After that lesson, slide 91 talks about character application, making healthy choices. We had a few adds to the slides, add being abstinent in front of delay sex. Again, it's a common theme. Point number 1, revise to read, identify one of your personal goals for this year from lesson 1 and state how abstinence or delaying sex, ideally until marriage, could help you reach that goal. see here. Yep. Again, there's a lot of adding abstinence before delay sex here. That's what the remainder of this is. Then closes out to review the notes and answer the essential question. Note-taking guide is already up. So after the love test, it just goes down to identify the goals, the thing I just read. My choice, reinforcement of the abstinence key message, and summary of the essential question, followed by parent interview. Any comments? Cool. Lesson 7. Pressures. Try to hold blood through this guy here. The teaching materials, on the bottom right of that first slide, the word bank, the word consent was there, but minors cannot legally consent, so we added the word legal in front of consent. It's where everywhere that consent is used, we changed to legal consent to imply that only legal consent is being discussed.
In the state of Texas, you have to be 18 in order to legally consent. 17? Okay.
It also, later in the lesson, it also describes about being under the influence is not legally consenting. So here in the first slide, we'll add our key message, the abstinence key message, add the word legal in front of the word consent. Adding our note about not all teens are having sex because the video talks about it. There's a video cut. At school, I feel a lot of peer pressure. Let's see, I'm going to read it real quick. We're not cutting her whole speaking part, just one sentence in the middle. Her whole part says, at school, I feel a lot of peer pressure. They'll just talk about, oh, at this party, I had sex with this guy, or I was hooking up with this guy and that guy. It's kind of like if you're not doing it, that's wrong. So our clip suggestion is to just say, at school, I feel a lot of peer pressure, period. And it's kind of like if you're not doing it, what's wrong with you? That way peer pressure is addressed, but the normalization part is gone. The video also talks about porn briefly. However, we decided to omit all mentions of porn. Slide 95 was pretty good. Media pressure activity. Again, it's talking about an imaginary fictitious TV show in this lesson. What is the false message? Sex is casual, no big deal. So we're guiding them to that, casual sex being a myth, that it is a big deal. Again, crossing out any porn reference, not relevant to our teaks here. Adding the word abstinence in a few spots. Paragraph 4 talks about, it says, sex is casual. It's just a game and has no negative consequences. That's the myth, right? The fact is, well, the curriculum says casual sex can have significant consequences. We want to remove the word casual and added the word adolescent. So it's going to read adolescent sex can have negative consequences that are life-changing, including STD, emotional consequence in pregnancy. Again, we were just...
Jen, can you scroll up to 96 again? Just want to make sure that I... So right there on the ask, where it says, what is the fact message? And you've got casual sex can have significant. We change that to adolescent as well.
Oh, yeah. Good catch, Tony.
Thanks.
Do you see it? You got that?
Okay,
All right.
do you have that?
Slide 96.
Slide 96.
Under the first ask.
The first ask, in parentheses, it says casual sex can have negative, significant, life-changing, where we change that to adolescent. And we just go through some more myths and facts. Here you'll see the definition of legal consequence, or legal consent, I should say. The curriculum said the laws vary from state to state, but depending on where you live, criminal charges may be placed on the creator, sender, recipient, or savior of child porn. Again, the pornography, we eliminated it. We have penal code there for minor intentionally or knowingly sending obscene photos. We left that. So you'll see slide 99 and 100 completely deleted. Pornography. Slide 101, overcoming pressure. See some highlighted additions there.
That was the,
It's a big ad. It seems like a big ad, but that was something that was in the student workbook that now is no longer available, right? Because they're not going to get a student workbook. So we had to add the story into the teacher. So it's not anything we made up. We just had to take it from the student workbook and put it into the teacher's note-taking guide, or the teacher's leader guide.
Let's make sure that a TEAC was met. Slide 102 goes to an activity, illustrate the importance of boundaries. Slide 103 talks about sexual progression. Wasn't our favorite topic, but it is a relevant one. So there's some fill in the blanks that'll be in the student note-taking guide. Slide 104, preventing sexual violence. So lesson 7 is the lesson that also covers our violence prevention TEACs. They're all captured under this lesson. Again, adding legal before the word consent to make sure that legal consent is addressed. Kind of jumping down a little bit, but slide 106, again, legally consenting. This is where the publisher actually really goes farther and says anyone who is drunk or high cannot legally consent to sex. Anyone who is below a certain age cannot legally consent to sex. Consent is never implied or given by dating, kissing, or your past behavior. Anyone can be a victim of sexual violence regardless of gender, sexual orientation, or age. So Choosing the Best does a pretty good job of capturing the legal aspect of consent there, but we made sure it's everywhere else legal is in there. Slide 106 also had some added content in green that you can read there. Explain why it's important to report to a parent or trusted adult sexual violence witnessed in your friends or your own relationships. Slide 107 was also added content in your note-taking guide. Add 3 behaviors of teen dating violence. A little farther down on slide 107 on that next page, there's a red edit. You'll see the content says, talk to someone you trust like a parent, teacher, school principal, counselor, or nurse, where we lined through teacher, principal, counselor, and nurse and added or other trusted adult. That's what the TEAC's verbiage says. So it says talk to someone you trust like a parent or other trusted adult is how that reads. Rape and Abuse Network and the National Sexual Assault Hotline are stricken through. Will be absent from that. Note to leader, learn the signs and symptoms of abuse. Find what crisis counseling services are offered by your school or county. Lesson 108 about respect. Didn't really have any edits. And then our summary.
And in case you didn't catch, this lesson would actually be our violence prevention lesson. So this lesson would actually be on its own permission slip, separate from all the other lessons. On the HSAE lesson, well, she brings up the note-taking guide, but on the HSAE permission slip, it would be lessons 1, or reproductive, 1 through 6 and 8. And then say C, violence prevention, and 7 would be on its own.
And we also, I know this is kind of jumping ahead, but we also had some input on the permission slips themselves being pretty detailed as to not just the title of the lesson, but these are the points that are in each lesson, so the parents will have a little, because I know that not every parent's going to go review the curriculum. So they'll have a better idea of what's in it. Again, key message, essential question, all the video segment, question answer materials. This basically follows the teacher guide. I'm just going to go through pretty quick. So here we actually, Jen and Katie, we actually have the same thing that was lined out on the teacher guide. The hotlines is added here. Are we leaving that there?
No, the reason it was scratched out was because it was telling the teacher to write it on the board, and we scratched that out because it's in the kids' note-taking.
Understood.
Because now I think it says, like, look at your note-taking guide for this one.
Got it. Again, key message at the end and the summary of the central question followed by parent interview. Any questions, comments, concerns? If not, lesson 8, final lesson. Thank you guys, y'all are troopers. Role plays is replaced with practicing refusal skills. Role play, we treat it as a dirty word. Essential question, how can teens respond to relationship pressures in a healthy way? So that's the theme of this message. Key message, abstinence reinforced. Slide 109, add our key message, which is the main slide of this video, or this lesson. We had 0 video edits in lesson 8, by the way, so this one actually was relatively clean. Although we do have our note, not all teenagers having sex, same as in every other lesson. As you scroll through, you'll see it's just kind of some strike-throughs turning to the page because we don't have student workbooks, so we're crossing all that out. Slide 116 is our first activity. To illustrate the ways of communicating. This lesson has the yes, no, yes method. I'll let y'all just kind of read through it. There weren't any really major impactful changes here. Just removing the word role play again, replacing that with practice refusal skills. So here the script again did guide the teacher to say the following activities contain principles that apply to all teens regardless of sexual preference or gender identity. We're opting to remove that from the script, but it is in the teacher's message in case questions or comments arise.
It's also in the training guide as well.
Right. The big thing we discussed on that was if it comes up like, hey, this doesn't apply to me, I only like girls and I'm a girl, right? So that's when the teacher can answer that question appropriately. We had one ad here to meet TEKS 18. Consider the information we discussed about being assertive, positive, yes, and negative, no statements. And create dating activities your groups just discussed. In your note-taking guide, explain how these strategies promote healthy relationships. So that's taking information and just getting them to apply it. Role play is crossed out in every instance and replaced with practicing refusal skills. That's pretty much the gist of it. Yeah, that's lesson 8. I mean, really just role play gets replaced with practice refusal skills is the main theme there.
Which is a T.
Note-taking guide, already up. Got our key message, reinforcing abstinence, essential question. how to respond to relationship pressure in a healthy way. Our lessons. These are our practicing refusal skills examples. Yes, no, yes methods. Application, key message, parent interview. What advice would you give me to help me stand up for my convictions is what they ask their parents. I like that one. Anybody have comments here? Questions, concerns? Anything from it? That's it. That's all 8 lessons. So does anybody have any follow-up comments before we... No?
There's a statement in the teacher training that just is repeated a couple times. It said any issue outside the curriculum. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And it says approved by the SHAC and board. Should it say recommended by the SHAC and approved
So if the...
by the board?
that's probably not a bad point. I mean...
I just know we keep saying that all year long, and I just wanted...
In the actual teacher training, I believe. Is that what you're talking about?
It's a couple of times. I just screenshot it. I don't have... Page 3 on one of them.
So instead of saying approved by SHAC, she's just saying make it say recommended.
Yeah, just say recommended by SHAC and approved by the board.
Yeah.
And I think it's page 9.
Thank
Are
you.
the 2 times I saw it.
We'll find it on our own, yeah.
Great catch.
Thank you.
That being said, since we're really close, and I know some of y'all stayed a lot longer, and we really appreciate it. Can I make a motion? So I would like to move for the SHAC to approve the Chase Committee's recommendation for the edited videos, note-taking guides, and leader guides.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. Sean. Any discussion? Okay, if let's see here. All those in favor, please say aye or...
The people on Zoom would be told on mute.
Oh. Okay. If you're on mute, will you please unmute? And then we're going to, all those in favor, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay and raise your hand. All right, the ayes have it, and the motion is approved.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Great. With that, I'd like to really thank everybody for attending this special meeting. This has been a labor of love. And with this, it's 1:42, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Have a great summer.